Hello everyone. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been taking a look at McFarlane Toys' offering around the Flash film, specifically centered on Batman, and the last two videos focused on the Michael Keaton version of Batman that's appearing in the film. This week, I'm going to take a look at BatFleck. Once again, Ben Affleck's Batman seems to be sporting a completely different batsuit in this film, and it can be very tricky to review a figure's authenticity to what we see on screen when the film hasn't even come out, so you'll have to bear with me as I kind of feel my way through this one. But let's start off by looking at the packaging. Now, by now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know my feelings on the DC Multiverse line packaging. I find it very bland. It is mostly just black borders, and it seems to waste an awful lot of space that could be really fun and colourful. Nevertheless, we do have the window display where we can see the figure on the inside of the packaging there, and behind him is that standard blue and white collage effect to really help the figure sort of pop out this packaging and add a little bit of colouring to this branding. Now, if we look at the side panel, again, you'll see this is quite a chunky box that he comes in, so this is quite a lot of space. All we really have is Batman in the Flash. It doesn't even specify which version of Batman we're looking at, so when you're putting this on your shelf, a little bit bland if you're stacking them up this way. When we look at the back of the packaging though, we do at least get an image. This is a lot more colourful, a lot more fun. This is more presentable if you want to put it on display. And it is largely text-free as well, which is fantastic. My only issue with this is that, just like they've done with the Michael Keaton version of Batman, they've opted for an illustration rather than an image from the film, which is unusual, and it makes me think that maybe they didn't have access to some of these promotional materials or production photos when they were producing and designing the packaging. And the image we have is a little strange. Proportionally, it looks a little bit off to me, and it's not the greatest artwork I've ever seen, so this is a little disappointing. Okay, so once the figure is liberated from his packaging, how does he stand up? Well, to be honest, I have some very mixed feelings about this figure. In some ways, he's really nice. In other ways, there's just something ever so slightly off. And that slightly off-kilter feeling I feel comes from the cowl, the head sculpt itself. I don't think this is a fantastic head sculpt, I've got to be honest, and I'm surprised because McFarlane Toys usually do a decent job, but I also felt they didn't really nail the Michael Keaton likeness either. They've done Ben Affleck Batman figures in the past which were pretty decent, so I'm not quite sure why this isn't working. For me, this just doesn't look accurate. The proportions aren't quite right. It just doesn't resemble Ben Affleck really. I'm just not feeling it. I also don't know quite what's going on with the eyes. Is he supposed to have goggles on here? We have seen images in the film where he's riding the bike where he does have goggles, but these aren't goggles, and yet at the same time they're not. You can't see the whites of his eyes either. I'm not sure if that's intentional. Perhaps it'll be explained in the film and I'm misreading it, but as it stands, this looks a little bit strange. It's a little bit off-point. It looks like he's got blacked out eyes, and it just looks strange. Also, I do find it really strange how the cowl kind of sits into his breastplate. It's a very different plastic they've used. Obviously, it's a very different colouring going on here. That might be deliberate. It might be reflected in the film. It's hard to say at this point, but it looks really weird on the action figure, and it looks like a separate piece that doesn't really fit in with the rest of the figure. Thankfully, things do get a lot better from here on out. I actually think the body sculpt itself is actually very nicely done. This is a brand new costume, so it's difficult to know just how authentic it is, but I can see an awful lot of detailing in this armour. It's very different to what I've seen previously, but I think it works. Now, there's two different kinds of plastic being used here to give it a sense of texture, I think. So you can see the top breastplate is very different to what's being used in the lower torso, and obviously there's rubber there around the crotch area to hide some of the joints. I think this works quite well. As I said, it gives it a bit more depth, a bit more texture. I like that there's a sort of rusted gold effect to his belt as well. It's kind of washed out. That works. Otherwise, there's no real paint washes running through this, which is a shame. It would have been nice if they enhanced this with a bit of a wash just to really accentuate some of the detail that we're seeing here in the sculpt itself. As it is mostly just sculpted and molded in the base plastic to give us that colour and texture. So there's certain parts of it that look a little bit shinier than others, which is nicely done, but as I said, it would have been nice to add a little bit of paint on here to really emphasise that and draw that out. Now, I did want to point out, you'll notice there are these rubber straps at the side of his utility belt, and on mine, the one on the right hand side of the hip has warped in the packaging, so it always sticks out and looks a little bit strange. Now, this might be unique to mine, of course, but it is something to look out for. Now, just like Keaton's Batman, he does come with a cloth cape, and I commend McFarlane Toys for doing this. I much prefer this approach to that heavy rubber cape. Now, I think the reason they've done this is because these figures are both made to go with their respective vehicles that are also being released in this line. But I did note that this version of Batman has a much slimmer, much narrower cape than the Keaton. The Keaton's cape actually came all the way around him. When you opened it out, it looked really impressive. This is just a very thin slip of a cape that just barely covers his back. So let's take a look at the articulation. There is a ball joint in the top of the head, so he can move his head all the way around, he can move it side to side, and of course he can nod it up and down a pretty good distance as well. There are ball joints in the shoulders, so he can lift his arms up and out. You'll notice there's also a butterfly wing joint here as well, which is fantastic, so that will allow him to move his arms forwards and backwards as well a good distance. So there's actually a huge range of motion here in this shoulder, which is really nice to see. There's a complementary bicep swivel and a double joint at the elbow as well. There's another ball joint at the wrist, allowing that wrist to rotate all the way around and hinge forwards and backwards. There's another ball joint in the torso that allows him to move from side to side, lean left and right, and bend forwards and backwards. There's ball joints in the hips, allowing the legs to kick out to the side, an upper thigh swivel as well, and of course those legs will kick forwards, they'll kick backwards. There's a double joint at the knee there, allowing the lower leg to kick all the way back, which is fantastic. And then finally, there is another joint at the bottom of the ankle there, which allows the foot to sort of swivel from side to side, but also hinge forwards and backwards. And then finally, there is toe articulation as well. Accessories wise, with the exception of the trading card and the standard display base, he's pretty light. He only comes with an extra pair of closed fists. Now, this is pretty disappointing for any Batman figure, and we already have the Michael Keaton figure to compare it to, and that came with some really cool accessories, including his grapple gun and his Batarang, and we get nothing here for Affleck, which is a real shame. To be fair, the closed fists are really cool. I'm glad that we got an alternate pair of hands, and he looks great with them. So I have to say, I like what they've done here. I just wish they'd give us an awful lot more. Something cool, at least a Batarang to go with your Batman. As a quick scale comparison, here he is next to the Michael Keaton Batman. As you can see, he seems to be a lot broader, a lot thicker than that version of the character or figure. Likewise, here he is next to the Robert Pattinson Batman as well. Again, obviously a very different look and style. And here he is next to the Arkham Asylum Batman and a comic book version, all from McFarlane Toys. Okay, so there you have it. I'm going to give this figure 3 stars. I'd initially seen some production photos of this figure and it looked really strange to me. It didn't look like a really good figure. The photos definitely didn't do it justice, and I wasn't anticipating a great deal from this figure. When I got him in hand, all the things that bothered me in those photos are still here. I don't like this cowl in particular. I think the head sculpt is a little bit strange. I don't like the way it fits into the body. It looks incongruous and weird, and it just doesn't look natural somehow. But that being said, there's actually some really nice things, very pleasing things about the figure that I didn't realise. I actually do like this outfit. I like there's actually a lot of detailing in this outfit, a lot of individual bits and pieces, which is quite cool. It's nice to see that in the sculpt, and I really like the articulation scheme. I think he's got a fantastic range of movements and articulation, which is a touch above what we normally get in this line. So all of that is really, really good, but then he is massively let down by the accessories again. Just getting an extra pair of fists isn't really enough. Now, McFarlane Toys don't tend to do an awful lot in the way of accessories, to be honest, in this line, which is something I think they do need to address going forwards. But lately I've started to see improvements, and as I said, that Michael Keaton figure is a really good example of the kind of things they could be doing, and I've got so much right there. This feels a bit of a retrograde step, and it feels a bit disappointing really that they haven't put as much effort into the Ben Affleck version of the character as they did with the Michael Keaton. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.